Okay, this is the demo for challenge 1. These first few functions initialize the clocks, ports, timers, and the flash controller. For the clocks, I stop the dog watch timer. I set the digital control oscillator to 24 megahertz, and the dividers for the main clock and the auxiliary clock are divided by 0, while the sub main clocks are both divided by 8. And the main and sub main clocks are both sourced to the digital controlled oscillator, while the auxiliary clock is sourced to the low power, low frequency clock, which runs about 32 kilohertz. While the ports and the port calls and the port for each port number I have. For port 1, I clear the entire port, all the registers for the port, and then I set the port input for switch 1. I configure it to use a pull-up resistor, and I enable it. And here I also set to use an interrupt. The interrupt set to go off on a high to low edge, and I clear any flag in the interrupt, and I enable the interrupt here. For port 2, I set the RGB LED. I set all of those as outputs and set them as general IO and set them all to low. And for the port 1 interrupt, I have it to check for the switch 1 flag, and if switch 1 is pressed, it just goes into a while loop to time out the watchdog timer. For the timer, I set the timer to be sourced to this sub main clock, and I clear the timer count, clock dividers, and count direction. I set the count mode to up mode, so it counts up to the value that's in the compare contrast register 0. And for the dividers for the timer, I divide it by 2 and then divide it by another 3. So it runs at 500 kilohertz, and the value in the compare contrast register is 2500, which takes 5 milliseconds to reach you, and then I enable the interrupt. My delay function is based on a 5-second delay. It does the parameter n, it repeats the 5-second delay n times. Here it sets the global volatile I to n. I clear the timer counter. I clear any flags that are there, and I enable the interrupt, and then I go into the while loop and wait. And every 5 milliseconds this interrupt will happen, which just decreases I. And then I clear the flag for it, so it just stays there for 5 milliseconds before I get decreased once. For the flash initialization, I set the wait state for both bank 1 and 2 to wait state 2, and I protect both bank 1 and 2, so basically I'm turning on the write erase bit on those banks. Okay, then I enable the main interrupt. I wait 250 milliseconds to let the clock settle. I initialize count, which is used to count up to 1 minute to start the erase and write operations. I start the watchdog timer. I clear it, and it's sourced to the auxiliary clock, and I have it set to a 1 second interval. And here I enable the switch interrupt. Here it just iterates through this continuously, and if count is 64, which is a minute has gone by, it does all the erasing and writing to it. If not, it just waits 950 milliseconds, which is enough time to still be able to clear the watchdog timer without it timing out. I increase count, and if out here the green LED is turned on, I turn it off. So green LED will be on for about a second. Once a minute has passed on, I unprotect all of bank 1, which each bank is about 128 kilobytes. I perform the mass erase, which erases all unprotected banks in memory. So erase all of bank 1, and it'll continue doing that until it successfully erases. And then here I have write memory, which is this function which I created a buffer that's 4 kilobytes long, which is a sector in memory, and I have the address of bank 1, and I fill every location in of my buffer with the value of hexadecimal A5. And then I go sector by sector of the bank and write one sector at a time, a hexadecimal A5 to every value in bank 1 of memory. And I clear the watchdog timer between every sector write, because it altogether takes more than a second to write all of bank 1. So this is to prevent the watchdog timer from timing out. And then once I do that, I'll turn on the green LED, and the code only gets here if both the erase and write operations were completely successful, and I reinitialize count. Okay, now to load our code into the board. Here it's loading the code. The address of the starting address of bank 1. Everything's already erased, because when you load everything to the board, it erases all main memory. Okay, let's run this. So it'll take about a minute to hit the first breakpoint. I have a breakpoint set before the erase, so I can view what the memory looked like before the erase, after the erase, and then I have it set also after I write memory, so I can verify that all memory was written to. Okay, so it's right before the erase, so we continue. It finished erasing everything, there wasn't anything to erase, and we now write memory. It takes like 5-6 seconds to do this. As you can see, it wrote to all of bank 1, which is 128 kilobytes. Let's go to the last location of bank 1. And let's just see it erase, since it didn't do that before. And bank 0 was left all alone. Here it is right before I'm going to perform the erase, and as you can see, everything got erased. Let's jump to the last memory entry of bank 1. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the how the program works.
Here I'm restarting the system. You can tell it's running by the green light here. Pressing this button times out the watchdog timer, and it should turn on the red LED. And every minute the green light LED should turn on, signifying that the flash controller successfully erased and wrote to memory every minute. And there it goes. Took about a minute.